Here in a second, we're going to introduce ourselves. I was going to say each other, but I'm not introducing you guys. You guys can introduce yourselves. And while we're doing that, if you want to get like a little bit of a jump on what we're going to be talking about, our first question that we're going to be talking about tonight is actually, what is something that you wish you could prove, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it's either real or not? So just what's something you wish you could really prove? And our overall theme tonight is just even asking, is God even real? So my personal preference, again, I can't force you to do anything. But so in this first question, at least, let's leave God, let's leave Jesus, let's leave religion out of the equation. Outside of that, what's something that you really wish you could prove was true beyond a shadow of a doubt and you had proof of it? So be thinking of that. Feel free to start chiming in. Let us know you're watching. Say hi, maybe like, share, and we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. Susan, you want to start us off?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Susan.
Hi, welcome. I'm Mary.
And I'm Justin.
I'm Carrie.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Patrick.
All right, Carrie's actually going to be the one that, up here at least, will be able to speak to what you guys are saying online. And so as she sees your comments, she'll be able to chime in and be able to speak to what you guys are saying. One little weird housekeeping thing that myself and Carrie stumbled upon last week is that as we were watching the video, we weren't seeing a lot of comments, and we've heard this from some other people too. It's super inconvenient, but what we found is that if you refresh your browser, all of a sudden a ton of comments popped up. So if for some reason you're out there and you're commenting and you're thinking, man, nobody's commenting but me, and nobody's commenting back to me, that is the opposite of what we want to have happening. And so feel free, refresh that browser. We know that's a little bit of a pain, and as we try to learn more about this, by golly, if you're a Facebook expert and you have insight into that, maybe let us know.
Please.
But for sure, tonight, feel free to refresh that browser so you can see some of the comments as we're talking. All right, so what is something that you wish you could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt is either real or not real, not in the realm of God? I've got an answer locked and loaded if...
Well, okay, so this is a horrible answer, but I'm gonna go to something like politics or something like people in places of power, elected officials and things like that. And so many don't tell the truth, and people will buy that hook, line, and sinker. And I'm not talking about any particular party. I want to make that quite clear, but I just wish that some people could have their eyes open. And it's like, oh no, they are just so full of it. And don't you get it? And can't you believe that? So yeah, I'd like to prove that sometimes.
No, I think that's a good one. Another one? Well, here's mine, and mine's a little less intense. I've always been, and as I was preparing for all this stuff, Melissa, my wife, she even kind of made fun of me because she guessed it right off the bat. And I said aliens, hands down. Yeah. Are aliens real or not? I would love to know, and I wish I could definitively prove one way or the other if they were real.
Good.
Wouldn't it be great?
Yes.
I mean, it solved that debate. I mean, either I'm maybe a hero either way, I guess, if they're real or not. Depends on who you're asking.
I've already been to Roswell, and so I'm already a convert.
Watch what you say. You're all out there now, so... Anybody else, what would you like to, and online, definitely, feel free to chime in, but what do you guys think? What's something you'd like to be able to prove or disprove? Without a shadow of a doubt. Nobody can refute it.
I'm thinking about the theory of evolution. I wish that once and for all we could prove or disprove, that theory, because we've gone round and round and round with this for so many years. And a lot of children growing up, they believe it or they don't believe it, and it's just confusing. So I wish that, I wish we could disprove it. Okay.
I actually wish we could prove it and show that it does exist along with creationism.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah, side by side.
Yes.
Not, okay. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But when I talk about the theory of evolution, it's like side by side here. We're talking about a fish that turned
She
that
wants
kind
to
of
prove
evolution.
that we were created as humans from the start,
Yeah,
not that
I believe that, yes.
Well, yeah, but there's so much more.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot more. Yeah.
Okay.
You're done. You're done on that one, huh? Patrick, what did you have? More controversial? Are we getting more controversial?
No, that I'm actually 6 feet tall.
To some
So
people,
really-
you are
I
6
just, I
feet
just
tall.
appear to be short.
So
That's-
really,
that's-
you're saying you would actually like to be 6 feet tall and then like be able to prove that?
Well,
beyond-
no, I'd like to prove that I am 6 feet tall. I just look short. That's
And what would you gain by that?
Something he always wanted, maybe.
How many inches? You're looking for how many inches?
No, no.
Oh my word.
Like,
We've
Get us going
gone
here.
around the bend.
Change it here.
I would like to know once and for all, proved or disproved, that Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster
Yeah.
ooh.
are real.
I'm all in. That was my other one besides
Nessie.
aliens was Bigfoot.
Bigfoot. Nessie and Bigfoot. Yeah.
I was going to say Loch Ness Monster.
Were you?
I'm less
Yeah.
concerned about Loch Ness Monster. Bigfoot's all over the place, and I just
Okay,
feel
where-
like,
Pacific Northwest for
is he
sure.
true.
real or
Nessie's
is it not?
contained.
Is it
He's
exist?
contained in the
I've
In the
got
lock.
I've got another one for you.
All right, let's hear it.
That the Earth is flat.
Oh, disprove that. Yes,
Disproving it
please.
or proving it?
Disprove or
How did-
prove?
oh my gosh.
Which
Yes, please
I
say the
know.
right
Oh,
one.
we're gonna have it.
said
We're
that the
all
Earth
gonna
is
get into a
flat.
fight
What?
here tonight around this
Oh,
table.
I know. What in the world? Okay, so there's always things, right, that I think any of us we love being. Hey, we love being right.
Yes.
I mean, let's be honest. We love being right, and we love being able to really prove it to people. A little bit, we love to shove it in their face, which isn't great, but that's also true, I think, a lot of times, that we're not just right, but that, in your face. I
They
was
were
right.
wrong?
Yeah, that you're wrong. Maybe that's even more. I like to prove that you're wrong more than I'm right. Man, that's interesting, isn't it? Okay, so have you ever then, and I assume we know the answer to this, but I'm really interested in maybe the second part of this answer. Have we ever really doubted something only to find out later that you were wrong? Has there ever been a time that you doubted something and then found out later that you were wrong? And so
Doubted or believed in? Or is
I'll
that-
say either way.
Either way.
Either way. Okay, so that you believed in something or doubted something and then found out that you were wrong. And then maybe the more important question to me in this is, how did that make you feel? How did you feel about that? And I'll give you my ridiculous one. When I was in kindergarten, my dad was building a garage in our backyard, and so there was a lot of lumber around, there's all this stuff, whatever, and there's this pile of junk, and my dad says to me and my two brothers, hey, you need to stay off that pile of junk. There's a lot of nails in there. If you step on a nail, it'll go into your foot. And I said, I'm wearing shoes. And he said, it'll go right through a shoe. And my little 6-year-old self said, there's no way that's true. And so I legit walked over to a nail, and I stepped on it, and by golly, it went straight through my shoe into my foot. And I was disappointed that I was incorrect. I was also in a lot of pain.
I was going to say, were you more disappointed about being wrong, or were you disappointed about the fact that you had pain in your foot?
In the moment, probably the pain, but looking back and knowing my personality, I'm going to say I was probably more disappointed that I was wrong, and then I felt like I had to go own up to that later on. I got out of bed later on that night after all is said and done. I remember I went to my mom, not my dad, and I whispered, and I said, I stepped on the nail on purpose because I didn't think it would go through my shoe, and I ran back to my room and went and got in my bed real quick. And there we are, folks. Now you know. I'm sure my mom's watching, and she remembers that and is thinking, poor Justin. How have you made it this far? So what about you guys? What's a time where you've believed something or not believed something and found out you were wrong? How'd that make you feel?
Well, now I'm going to go a way different direction,
All
but
right.
and it involves my son Gabriel, because I was told I couldn't have children, and I was actually tested, and the doctors told me you cannot have children. So of course, when I found out that Gabriel's mom was pregnant with him, I, was, there's no way I can't have kids. But then when I found out that 99.9% I am the father, I was just overjoyed. I mean, I couldn't have been happier.
Yes.
So,
So that, in that sense, you weren't disappointed. You were actually elated that you
yes.
were wrong.
Oh, yeah. But up to that point, I mean, I was, pretty sure that that wasn't true. So,
Huh. What about you guys? Any other things that you were sure of, not sure of, or completely sure not of? How do you say that? Were sure that it was not true, sure was true, and then you found out you were wrong.
What did he say?
Several things. Well, I don't know. I mean, this is, I'm just drawing a blank, but similar to, so, okay, having a child. So when I was pregnant with my first child, Thomas flew in the Air Force on this aircraft that had radiation. And so all of the people who were in his office, everybody was having girls. Like, you didn't have boys. You just, everybody, and we attributed that to the radiation. It's like, okay, you're having girls. And so when we went for one of the ultrasounds and the doctor said, oh, you're having a boy. And I'm like, no. And we did not believe that we were having a boy.
Really?
Until, well, because, shadows and things, and you just never know. This is why you should just sometimes wait to do the whole nursery if you're going to go one way or the other, blue or pink, totally. And which we didn't do that anyway. But yeah, we did not believe until that child was born and we saw that he was in fact a boy.
Interesting.
Yeah, weird, but.
All right, so then how does that make you feel? Whether you have a specific example or not, how does it make you feel when you find out that you're wrong? And when you were so sure? I mean, it makes me feel, again, I think it makes me feel super disappointed, I guess. I think embarrassed. There's a level of embarrassment for me.
Well, I know that I can usually fess up when I'm wrong about something, but I am disappointed when it happens because I think one of my biggest fears is that people will think that I'm stupid.
Oh.
And so being wrong about something just feeds into that fear a lot. And so that's...
I agree with you. I had such a bad example. Oh my gosh.
You feel belittled.
Belittled, yeah. I mean, it's more than disappointed. There's not a word for it, but disappointed is sort of an understatement.
Well, I think there's that embarrassment too, because he's like, you stuck your reputation, or staked. What is it? Staked?
Staked.
Stuck?
No, you staked.
You staked
You're
your
right.
reputation.
Yes.
I've had a long day. You
Yeah,
staked your
language is not our
reputation on
strength
this.
tonight, as a group.
So yeah, there's that level of embarrassment because now people will think that, I don't know, maybe you think that people will think differently of you.
Okay, so then let me ask you this, and I'm not looking for examples on this necessarily as to a time when you have, but how have you felt when you've tried to convince somebody of something that you believed and they didn't believe it? How does that make you feel when you are just adamantly trying to convince somebody of something? And again, online, we'd love to be able to hear from you as well.
I'm refreshing the page.
We're refreshing like
Comment
crazy.
away.
But how does that make you feel? Now you're on the other side and you're trying to convince somebody.
Oh, super frustrated.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Just how can you not see this?
Right.
Any other feelings besides frustration?
I've come to the point where, depending on, especially if it's about religion or anything God-like, I've come to the point where I understand that a lot of people aren't going to agree. They're not going to see maybe what I see. They're not going to understand unless, I don't know, they have to see it for themselves.
They do.
And so at that point, it is just about, okay, I'm sad that they don't see what I see, but I get it, and I just hope that they see it at some point.
That's such a good point, and you're right, because I've had discussions with people, and especially when people are in a state of despair, and you really want them to have this same hope that we have, and so there is that sadness that they don't have that, and they just can't quite get there, you know?
Yeah. And I think we can feel like that with a lot of different things, right? So whether it's religion or anything else. I mean, chances are, if we are trying to convince somebody of something, it's because it's something that we believe in really deeply and at our core, right?
And I was going to say sometimes it brings up anger.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to, and they just won't get it. So I'm honestly, I think about times when I've like that, and a lot of times it leads to an argument. So because of that, you get that anger.
I think our attitude, okay, I'm going to confess that I watch Dr. Phil every day.
Okay. All right.
All good.
But I've seen him a few times look at one of his guests and say, do you want to be right or do you want to fix the problem? And that kind of sticks with me, you got to look at yourself. Are you doing this because you want to be right and proud in that, or do you want to fix it?
Yeah.
I think that's good. So we have to prepare ourselves, though. We have to know that, our motive isn't just so I can be right,
Right.
Yeah.
Kennedy on here says, hi Kennedy and Will, by the way. I agree that it's hard not to share your religion when others are down, especially when they are strong non-believers.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It's hard to not share your religion, she says. It's hard to not share.
Because it's something that's made such an impact
Yeah.
on your own life, right?
When you see them down, like you said, Mary, when you see them down, you want to share it, the hope. Or was it, what one of you shared that?
No.
And sometimes I've seen where they are down and people do kind of try to come in and be encouraging and talk about God or how they can find hope, and then other people come on and, are they serious? I can't believe they came on here and did that. That's just horrible. I'm like, well, okay, no, it's not horrible, because we all have different ways of feeling better and having hope. So, this may not work for you, but perhaps it is something. So the fact that they're trying to put something out there is not a horrible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tonight, again, our whole main theme is talking about, is God even real? And that idea of obviously strong feelings that revolve around that on both sides, right? I mean, that's not usually something that people are super wishy-washy about, and sometimes they may be, but usually it's a pretty strong feeling either way. And so we're going to look, as we always do, to some kind of story from the Bible to try to pull from and kind of just get some insight into how not just God, but in this case, Jesus and other people that were following him tried to interact. And in a famous, short name for somebody, right, is this idea of doubting Thomas, right? Poor Thomas has gotten a raw deal for a long time and is strongly referred to as doubting Thomas. And so just as a quick review of what this whole story is you got Thomas, who's one of the disciples, right? So he's just one of the people that followed Jesus around for several years, listening to him teach, listening to all that he had to say, watching all the things that he did, and he's bought in. He's bought in that Jesus is God, is the Son of God, and here we are, right? And so just like the other people that are following Jesus around, it's a fairly big shock, no matter how much Jesus kind of tried to prep him for it, that all of a sudden Jesus gets crucified. He's killed, now he's dead. He gets laid in a tomb, rock rolled in front of it, soldiers guarding it, the whole 9 yards. And they end up, some of Jesus' followers end up going to the tomb a couple days later, checking out, honestly, just to grieve, really, and to do some things that were socially appropriate for them at the time. With Jesus' body, they show up. Jesus' body isn't there. These women go and tell the men who are all hiding. So there you go, men. And the men go. They also see Jesus' body isn't there. Now they're all hiding in this room because they're afraid. Even though Mary, one of the followers of Jesus, certainly is like, hey, actually Jesus showed up and he's alive. And they're like, all right, but we're still going to hide in this room and be afraid. So then, as they're hiding in this room and they're afraid, Jesus shows up, right? And he says, hey, peace be with you. It's fine. Don't freak out too much. And then, but he doesn't say anything else before he says, hey, look, here's my hands, where the nails were, here's my side, where I got stabbed. It's me, for real. And then he says some other stuff to him, and then he goes about his way, doing whatever Jesus did at that point in time. I have no idea. And poor Thomas is out picking up bread, I don't know, grabbing water. I don't know where he was, but he missed the show. And he shows up, and everybody tells him, and he says, until I see his hands and his side myself and touch him, I'm not going to believe you. And so now he gets unfairly dubbed Doubting Thomas, because 5 days later, which is a long time, kind of a long time. If I'm Thomas, I'm thinking, kind of, I told you. It's been 5 days, Well, Jesus shows up again. This time Thomas is there. Jesus says, hey, here you go, hands, side. And then he says, what I think we unfairly at times, and this isn't the point of tonight, but for some reason it stuck with me this time when I read it, I think we unfairly feel like Jesus then is talking straight to Thomas when I think he's talking to everybody in the room. When he says, hey, you guys believe because you saw me. And there are a bunch of other people that are going to believe that have never seen me. And, man, blessed are they who believe who haven't seen me. Because the other disciples, first thing he did, he showed up and he's like, hey, it's cool, it's me, peace be with you. And then he's like, okay, here you go, it's my hands, it's my side. Kind of feel like Thomas gets a raw deal. Because he does the same thing to Thomas that he did to the other people. Anyway, that's all on the side. Bottom line, Thomas finds himself in a spot where people that he really trusted right, are saying to him, hey, here's this thing that we all saw, that we all saw with our own eyes, we touched with our hands. And Thomas is insistent that he wants to see it for himself. And so my question is, and I think this is where we start to get into a little bit more of the seriousness of it all, why do you guys think that we are so insistent on being convinced by seeing for ourselves? Why do we have to see it for ourselves? And it's not just Thomas, poor Thomas, getting the raw deal, but how many times have we been told, hey, the nail will go right through your shoe, Justin, and you're like, will it? I'm going to step on the nail. Why do we insist on that, do you think?
Well, like, for part of that story that sticks out to me is, okay, the other disciples said, they all said it. Why would Thomas even doubt that? But, and I'm sure a lot of other people have said the same thing, but then it's like, okay, well, you go through your life being lied to, not told the whole story, or the story gets exaggerated, or whatever. So it's like, and we've all said it, well, until I see it with my own eyes, and especially nowadays with the internet and everything else, it's like, so it's kind of, I find it interesting because it seems like, Thomas was going through the same thing then that, like, we go through now. It's, how many times was he lied to? How many times was he told, oh, hey, if you go do this, you're going to be, you're going to find wealth, and it doesn't happen. And
experience has told him,
right? Yeah,
you have to see it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And you bring up the, what we see on the internet and all the, you just need to go fact check this and Snopes this and whatever, but is it doubting the message or doubting the messenger? Like, did he have doubt in his, maybe he thought that his friends were just so much in mourning that they were seeing things, or he was questioning their sanity, or,
Yeah.
well, a lot of people question the sanity of some of the disciples, and even
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So that's a good question. Was he doubting that Jesus could raise from the dead? Or was he doubting that the people were actually seeing what they said that they were seeing?
Yeah.
What was he actually doubting?
I'd be interested to know, like, what we around this table think. I'd be interested to know what you guys out there think, and maybe feel free to chime in for sure, but also feel free, maybe let's go give us a like if you feel like you are more likely to doubt the message, or a heart, let's say, if you're more likely to be doubting the messenger these days.
Yeah.
And I don't know, as I even say that, I think for me it's that I'm doubting the messenger more often than I hadn't thought about it, but I think that's where I land. I think that I doubt the person that happens to be telling me stuff more often than not than what the messages they're actually saying.
Well, if you have the kind of, experiences where people have told you something and you believe them and it's wrong, or, something like that. If you grew up with an older sibling, I didn't because I was the older sibling, but if you grew up with an older sibling, most likely that older sibling told you some things that weren't true just to have a laugh at your expense. You're going to grow up to be the kind of person who says, I don't believe anything until I know it for myself.
Is your brother online?
No, my brother is not.
Do you get the brother?
Yeah, he probably did that to me a few times because even though I'm the older sibling, he was the meaner one. So, but if you have a consistent, story in your life where people are always letting you down, you're obviously gonna start doubting every messenger on earth, and that's every person on earth.
Okay.
Well,
oh no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I've thought about this before. Is like in my own life, like what would I do, say, if tomorrow Jesus came back, and somebody, jumps online and says, "Hey, Jesus has come. He's here." How many of us would be packing our bags and heading out?
Well, if you believe Netflix, it's a lot of people.
That's true.
I'm just saying. It's. I think most of us would be like,
Yeah.
I got to see this first. I got to see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
Because I've thought about that. Am I in a place right now where if Jesus come back tomorrow, I would, I'd be out the door and running.
Yeah.
So
You have to see it for yourself.
And I mean and that's what we're ultimately talking about here, right? I mean, we're talking about God and how often, all of us up here obviously had people and have had people tell us what God is, who God is, how God acts, who we should expect God to be, and yet there's something to be said for experience, right?
Yes.
And experiencing that. And so I think that we do lean on that side. Like you said, that was a good point, Patrick. I think I would wait, right? I would wait and be like, I've got to see this for myself before I'm packing my bags and going to
yeah, 'cause I mean,
Idaho.
and-
I don't know where Jesus is showing up.
Yeah, and we hear it a lot too from, just even in the church, here at Living Hope, people say, oh, well, I heard from God, and I had this experience with God, and I've sat there at times and been like, because I didn't experience that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I have experienced God in my own ways, so it's.
Okay, so I think what we're hearing, if I'm summarizing this, is that we really like to see stuff for ourselves, right? And I think that whether you're sitting up here, whether you're watching online, whether you're watching a rebroadcast of this later, chances are if you've watched to this point, it's because you at least are willing to say that you're in some sort of seeking, I want to be in some kind of convinced mode of God. And yet, hearing it from any of the five of us isn't going to cut it. And quite frankly, and I thought about this before, that's not any of our jobs,
Not at
right?
all.
And to convince anybody that God does or doesn't exist, and yet here we are chit-chatting about it, right? So let's just assume that everybody that's involved in this at this point is at least interested in the idea of looking for some kind of interaction with God or some kind of proof that there is God or whatever it is. So let me ask you this then. If we're so convinced that we need to see it for ourselves, right, what are the ways that we are searching? What are we actually doing to try to find out for ourselves if God is real or if God is not?
We're praying.
Okay.
We're reading. I'm talking about the Word now, and people's testimonies, their experiences.
That's
Thinking all-
again hearing versus seeing, though, right?
Okay, but all right, I was reading, and I cannot tell you what book it was that Paul was writing, and of course it was to the Christians, and he said, and let's go on to know God. That's what it says. So I stopped, and I said, wait a minute, I'm your child. I'm saved, been born again. I already know you. And no, I didn't. You have to go on to know God. Okay, to know Him is to know His attributes. We have learned the love of God. We've probably experienced His love. That's a part. That's one and if you've studied grace or mercy, if you've studied that, you're going on to know Him, like Paul advised. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. What else? How else are we actually seeking to know if God is real or not? Again, out there, we'd love to hear from you. What is a way that you seek to find out or to figure out for yourself if God is real?
Yeah, I saw John joined and Robert joined. Anybody who's on here now who just jumped in, if you need to know what we're talking about, just ask me and I'll comment on it. And I've put some messages on here, but repeat the question one more time.
Yeah, so how is it that we are seeking to find out if God is real? If that's a question for you, what are you actually doing? Or back when it was a question for you,
Oh yeah.
how did you go about figuring that out or deciding that for yourself, that yes, God is real? Or maybe you figured out in your experience that no, God is not. And I'd be curious to know how you figured that out.
Yeah.
What did you do?
I ran out of gas. I was
Yeah.
on Interstate 35 in Oklahoma, and I ran out of the gas in between these two towns. And I'd gone to a show, and it's at night, and I'm in this dress, and I'm pushing my car. Thankfully, it was a very small, tiny Geo Metro, and I'm pushing my car to an exit. I don't know. I think I had a cell phone at the time. But I just remember somebody drove past or somehow, and then they backed up the exit, and they came up, they talked to me, they said, we're going to go get some gasoline and bring it to you. And then more people came by and said, hey, do you need help? I've got some people helping me. And this girl brings me this container of gasoline, and she literally says, you know why I did this, right? And I'm overwhelmed at that point. I was like, well, this is a God thing. She said, yes. I'm like, so I'm convinced that, there were angels among us. And that really, because that was at a time in my life when I was very disillusioned from the church too. So yeah.
She actually said, you know why I'm doing this, right? Is that how she worked?
I believe that's what she said, yeah. Wow. It was very much yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
I heard a story. It's not my story, but a friend of mine at a church I used to go to, he was an atheist. And he walked by a bookstore and saw a Bible in the window and said, well, if I'm going to be an atheist, I should at least know what I'm against. So he bought the Bible, read it cover to cover, I don't know how many times, and now he's a believer.
Huh.
There you go.
So again, there's that aspect of going to see for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And as time, we're running out of time, which is a shame because I love this conversation overall. And I think it's a serious conversation. And I think it's a serious question that we continually, whether we are conscious about it or not, kind of keep asking ourselves, no matter what point we are in a journey with a relationship with God, right? Is how am I sure that this is real, that God is real? And I just want to say, I guess, on my end, if you're waiting around for like a person to convince you of that, like through some argument, then you're waiting around for the wrong thing, right? This isn't one of those situations where somebody's going to say, hey, Patrick, guess what? Jesus showed up in my room and showed me his hands and his side. It's legitimate. He's real. Because Patrick's probably going to say, well, when I see the hands and I see the side, then I'll believe. And that's not because Patrick's a jerk, and it's not because Thomas was a jerk. It's because we're all people, right? And we want to experience something, and we want to know something for ourselves. But it's a little bit of a cop-out, and this is where I'll land on this. It's a little bit of a cop-out to say, well, I need to experience it myself, if you don't go out and you try to experience it yourself. Then all you're doing is just avoiding it, right? And those are two different things. Now, let me say this. If God is, in our experience here, obviously our take is that God does exist, right? I think that's a consensus around this table. So if God does exist and God's real and God's already trying to have a relationship with you and me, which is what our belief would be for sure, then what does that say to us about our doubt? Because that's what we're saying. There's a level of doubt. And I think what it says to us about our doubt is that God's okay with our doubt, right? That's all right.
But in spite of our... Oh, go ahead.
When doubt can lead to your questions and your answers and your growth, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. The opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith is certainty.
Exactly. So that's what I was going to say, is like if you're doubting and you're looking for proof, well, what does that mean for your faith? If you have proof, then do you need faith?
Yeah. So God's okay. That's not you don't have to be somehow weirdly convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt for God to be okay with that. God's okay with it. So then what's that mean for me and you, right? If God's okay with our doubt, what should that mean for me and you?
It means we should be okay with our own and with the doubt of others.
Both things, right? Not just our own doubt, but we should be okay with the doubt of other people too. It's not any of our jobs to get angry, which is what we sometimes do. We all referenced it earlier, that we get angry and want to convince. And I want to say right now, I'm sorry out there if that's ever been your experience from me or someone else, that if your experience has been that people have wanted to convince you so much that they got angry at you and basically belittled you in some way, shape, or form, or wanted to prove you wrong as opposed to show you what they have experienced. I'm sorry for that, and that's not what God does. God does not equal us as people, right? We as people are going to be screwed up no matter who we are and what we say we are.
Yeah.
And we all try our best, but we're all going to be screwed up, right? don't take those negative experiences too far and assume that's how God sees you or interacts with you as well, because that's just false. It's not true.
Amen.
And so that's really what it comes down to, right? How I act towards others is that I should be able to share my doubt, and I should be able to be really open to your doubt as well, right?
Mic drop.
Yeah.
Open, be humble. I think we can bring that word in, humble, before people. And what you just said brought me back to the point where you said you want to convince them. You want to convince them that they're wrong. That's what you said. A lot of the times we want to convince them that I'm right.
Sure.
And that's
Both
more.
ways.
But if that's more important, it's not going to
not the
flow.
point.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's not the discussion. That's
Right.
yeah. If you're trying to convince someone, then it's not a discussion. It's not a humble discussion.
Right.
It's just a debate or an argument. And we don't want debates and arguments. We want conversations.
Yeah.
If
Right.
if I
Absolutely.
can say that. I said that as we, but collectively.
No,
But
I think that's true.
You're right.
So here's my encouragement to you. If you're out there and you're not so sure if God's real or God's not real, and you have had any number of experiences, positive or negative, with people that want to convince you or not convince you either way, my encouragement to you would be go out and find for yourself. I think that's all right. Go out and find out for yourself. Give God a chance to be able to interact with you. Be open to that. And find some stillness where you can experience what God might have for you. Because I guarantee you, if God exists, He is perfectly capable of letting you know it.
Amen.
If you are open to it.
That's
so that's
good.
my encouragement. Give God a chance to prove that He does exist, that God does exist. And that would be my encouragement. Man, I just want to thank you. We've got to get going here. But I want to thank you so much for joining tonight, whether you're watching live or whether you're watching a rebroadcast of this. Again, we really, really just love having you on and interacting with you. Like this, share this. If you think that somebody could benefit from it as you watch it throughout the week, talk about it to a friend, let them know what you watched. I think it would be super helpful to a lot of people, hopefully. And my hope is that we can go out this week and just really be open to the ways that God is trying to interact with us. That's my encouragement to you. I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us, and just really hope you guys have a good night. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.